Hello.
All right, Pastor.
Hi,
I'm
Pastor.
ready. Bless the Lord.
It's on you.
All right. We thank God for being here tonight. We praise and honor God because He's good to us, and we're going to finish up on this Corinthians 9. Thought was going to get done last week, but I'm really going to get done this week. Because we're not going to talk too much, okay? Okay, so I'm going to start, I think it's, somebody said I left off at 7, but I'm thinking of we start at 12, so. I'm not sure, but we're going to start on chapter 9, 12. Paul was aware between my glasses and the light and other glasses broke in my hands.
You want me to read it, Mother?
Yeah, I've got this.
Test it. Okay. You starting at 12, you said?
Yes, sir.
Okay. If others be partakers of this power over you, are not we rather, nevertheless, we have not used this power, but suffer all things, lest we should hinder the gospel of Christ. Hold on one second. Do you not know that they which minister about holy things live of the things of the temple, and they which wait at the altar are partakers with the altar? Even so hath the Lord ordained that which preach the gospel should live of the gospel. But I have used none of these things, neither have I willingly these things, that it should be so done unto me. For it were better for me to die than that any man should make my glory in void, something like that. It's messed up on the screen. For though I preach the gospel, I have nothing to glory of, for the necessity is laid upon me. Yea, woe is unto me if I preach not the gospel. For if I do this thing willingly, I have a reward, but if against my will, a dispensation of the gospel is committed unto me. What is my reward then? Verily that when I preach the gospel, I might make the gospel of Christ without charge, that I abuse not my power in the gospel. For though I be free from all men, yet I have made myself servant unto all, that I might gain the more. And unto the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might gain the Jews. To them that are under the law, as under the law, that I might gain them that are under the law. To them that are without law, as without law, being not without law to God, but under the law to Christ, that I might gain them that are without law. To the weak became I as weak, that I might gain the weak. I am made all things to all men, that I might be by all means save some. And this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be partaker thereof with you. Know ye not that they which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize? So run that you may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Know that now they that do it obtain a corruptible crown, but we are incorruptible. I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Am I not an apostle? Oh, I think that was it, right? Yeah, that's the last chapter, 27.
Paul was aware at that time that the people, even though he was the one ministering and working toward helping and getting them saved, he recognized that they were giving their support to other people. And he was just saying, why wasn't he worth the support? Should he have not been getting, even though he worked a job and he wasn't dependent upon them to give him support, but yet, if they was going to give it to someone, it should have been to him, because he was the one that they were getting saved and set free. So, you know, sometimes I think sometimes we think out of one side of our head or something, because we don't understand or realize the man or the woman that works to support you, to help you to come forth, should also is worthy of his hire too. And so if you have somebody that's leading you and teaching you and training you, you should always be willing to give unto them. Because one thing I recognize is that if you're leading a group of people, it's hard to carry a full-time job and be there every time the door is open and you got to open them. It's just not an easy thing. So Paul was saying, hey, ain't we worthy of our so if you can give it to others, you can very well give it to us. But he said he didn't intend for you to do. He worked and he made his own way so that you wouldn't have to be, so he didn't have to lean on you for financial help. And I hear pastors say all the time that they don't receive anything for the work that they do. But they spend a lot of time with us. And I mean, it's important that we appreciate what they're putting forth. Because if they don't study to know what's going on, to hear from God is what God is saying we need, then what happens? That's why you got a lot of people struggling today. They're going to church, but they're not receiving what they need to grow. Because it's important that we grow and not remain in the same, remain the same, in the same place. We need to grow. We need to grow up. And sometimes growing up hurt, right? It's like your bones being stretched, and when your bones are stretched, they ache. They don't feel good. But Paul did what he felt that was correct for him to do. And I think this is a good thing for us all, that you do what God is telling you to do, and let him be the judge, and let him deal with the folks. There's people. Okay. 13. 13 was talking about let's jump here. When with the brief background in mind, let us now get back to the better half of the verse, a verse. Wait a minute, y'all forgive me here. I didn't get them all mixed up here. Had it all were laid out, but now it's all great. So y'all forgive me, I'm getting it together. You know, I'm getting a little help at age. I ain't seeing like I should. Huh? Can you? Uh, 14. Finally, Paul introduces the definite,
Finally, Paul introduces the definite command of the Lord himself. He commanded that those who preach the gospel should live from the gospel. This would be conclusive proof alone of Paul's right to support from the Corinthians. But this raises the question of why he did not insist on being supported by them. The answer is given in verses 15 through 18.
so he didn't demand them to help him. Go ahead, read.
Okay, I'm gonna go sit down. 15. 9 and 15. He explains that he used none of these things. That is, he did not insist on his rights, neither was he writing these things at the present time in order that they might send money to him. He would rather die than that anyone should be able to rob him of his boasting. 9 and 16. Paul is saying that he cannot boast in the fact that he preaches the gospel. A divine compulsion is laid upon him. It is not a vocation that he chose for himself. He received a tap on the shoulder, and he would have been a most miserable man if he had not obeyed the divine commission. This does not mean the apostle was not willing to preach the gospel, but rather that the decision to preach did not come from himself, but from the Lord.
So Paul was not, he wasn't preaching to get what he could get from the people.
Right.
Paul was preaching to help and to obey God, because God had gave him a commission. And when God commands you to do something, no matter what you're thinking, it's important that you do what God is saying. Not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of those around you, for the benefit of those that need it. Because he wasn't trying to be, he wasn't trying to just get something. A lot of times you hear people say, I ain't giving that preacher no money because he ain't getting my money. But he's not after your money. He's trying to get some money to you. Because most of the time when you crying about what little money you got, you ain't got nothing to do nothing with no way. So he ain't trying to take nothing from you. And that is something as people of God we need to understand. God is not trying to take nothing from you, and the man or woman that he uses ain't trying to rip you off. He's trying to get you something, that you need even the more. So we have to be grateful, and thank God Paul wasn't whining and complaining. He didn't say take care of me, even though I know I'm worthy of it. And I'm sure Pastor knows he's worthy of his hire. But he's not begging you because he don't want to hinder the gospel. He don't want to hinder you getting what God has for you.
Yes.
He's trying to help you. Go ahead, read more. It's nice to every day.
9:17. If the Apostle Paul preached the gospel willingly, he would have the reward that goes with such service, namely the right of maintenance. Throughout the Old and New Testaments, it is clearly taught that those who serve the Lord are entitled to support from the Lord's people. In this passage, Paul does not mean that he was an unwilling servant of the Lord, but simply stating that there was a divine compulsion in his apostleship. He goes on to emphasize this in the latter part of the verse. If he preached against his will, that is, if he preached because there was a fire burning within him and he could not refrain from preaching, then he would have been entrusted with a stewardship of the gospel. He was a man acting under orders, and therefore he could not boast in that.
So there was no boasting. He wasn't trying to boast. He was just obeying God. And I believe that to obey God is just better than anything else because if he's called you, if he's directing you, he's going to give you what you need to move forth and to do what you're supposed to do. And it's not for you to be walking around whining about this, that, the other. You know, we have an habit of just whining about everything. But it's good to recognize when God has given you a command and to obey God. Because if you obey God, then God, He's going to take care of you.
Yeah.
But if you just whining because you don't, it's just ain't good enough.
Right.
But sometimes, even when it's not a whole lot, sometimes when we're at a place where it's small or something, it's like we'd be ashamed. But he said, don't be ashamed of the gospel, and don't be ashamed of what you're getting to run the gospel, because God is going to take care of you. And if we be humble before the Lord, He will do all those things that He said He's going to do. And so we don't have to be whining and complaining because we ain't getting all that we think we're supposed to have.
Got a comment. Yeah, as we talking about this, when you was talking about ministers, what they're worth, isn't it Mental Health Month this month, or is that next month?
No,
it was March.
Yeah, month of March. And I was having a conversation with one of my sons, and he was telling me about his stress levels and all the things on his mind. And I've been telling him to go to church for the last few months. And I was like, man, I'm getting frustrated telling you to go to church, because you keep telling me all your issues and your problems. And I said, God gave me wisdom. And I told him, I said, a lot of times we focus on our physical needs and not our mental health. And I said, a lot of times, because us as African Americans don't go talk to therapists, a lot of our mental health needs are catered to in church. There's many times people have come into church wanting to give up, and they like, this is my last shot, I'm gonna go commit suicide. Y'all heard them testimonies? And God told me to come to church, and something that was said by that minister caused them not to commit suicide, or not to go commit murder, or to be able to have peace in their home that night. Sometimes we don't value what the ministers are giving you with your mental health. It's many days I done came to church down, depressed, upset, all kinds of things. But then when I walked out of church, whatever was said, because that minister laid before God to get a word that spoke to me, that gave me whatever I needed to make it to the way. I said, son, you're having issues. I said, a lot of us go to church. I said, and it gives us the strength and the understanding we need to make it through the next week. I said, you're not getting anything. to help you make it through the next week.
Yeah, right.
And he went to church. He said, man, Dad, I'm so glad that I went to church. I know we be emphasizing getting saved, give your life to Christ. No, it's something that like when they go to see a therapist, they're not getting saved most of the time, but they getting something that's going to help them make it through their day. They ain't surrendered their life to God. They're on the couch, none of that. But they come off their couch and be like, man, thank you. I can make it. I know, because I done been there. But you understand what I'm saying? So we have a whole therapy session every Sunday. That whatever, and it's amazing that whatever that person is going through throughout their week, everybody going through different things, but everybody get what they need. Now that's God. And that's a minister that have labored before God. And that's worth something. It should be. You know, to me, it's worth something.
Yes, it's worth something. It's worth our lives, because this is what's happening. He's saving our lives, you know, that he's keeping us. He's just speaking a word from God. So anytime the Lord speak a word into your life, that means life. That means you're going to do better, or you can do better. So it's a good thing to have a pastor that care enough to lay before the Lord.
Yes.
So when it's time to take care of his needs, we shouldn't be whining about, I ain't getting him nothing. But because for number one, he ain't asking you, he ain't begging. He's not asking you for anything. So, but if your heart is correct and you're coming to the Lord yourself correctly, you willingly do what needs to be done. And I shouldn't have to beg you. Yeah.
9 and 18. If then he could not boast in the fact that he preached the gospel, of what would he boast? Of something that was a matter of his own choice, namely that he presented the gospel of Christ without charge? This is something he could determine to do. He could preach the gospel to the Corinthians, at the same time earning his own living, so as not to use the full, not to use to the full his right for maintenance in the gospel. To summarize the apostle's argument here, he is making a distinction between what was obligatory and what was optional. There is no thought of any reluctance in his preaching the gospel. He did that cheerfully, but in a very real sense, it was a solemn obligation that rested upon him. Therefore, in the discharge of that obligation, there was no reason for his boasting. In preaching the gospel, he could have